it's Ira here with Kareli, and it's about 11:30 p.m. US EST. So I'm in Miami at the MBA CSCA conference, which is essentially a conference for the career centers at business schools globally to get together. So business schools in the US, in Europe, and Asia, elsewhere. And they actually have, so MBA CSCA has 3 major conferences throughout the year, and this one is the global one. And then they have one that's for Europe, and then they have one that's for Asia. All right, so, well, first of all, I know you're probably like, how, this does not look like Miami, and it doesn't. It's a hotel room. But I am here, look, see, there's my badge, there. And the reason I'm in this terrible, horrible situation is that I got horrible sciatica pain, and I literally cannot move. And part of the reason I'm doing, if you're wondering like, how does she manage to do this like in so much pain, it's actually because this distracts me. If I do this, it will help ease my brain thinking about the pain. And hopefully it will be useful to people watching as well. So again, I mean, typically we do these videos because, you know, there are a lot of people who are not here, right? So this is for the benefit of so many people who work in career services, whether MBA or otherwise, because a lot of this is applicable across programs, are you know, not here. Of course, it's a fabulous conference, by the way. There's, you know, probably, I think there's about 350 attendees, if I'm getting that right. And thank you so much to MBA CSCA. As always, they've just done a stellar job putting this together. Great speakers, really good sessions. We're just about halfway through. But you know, there are a lot of career services staff across the board in different universities, other parts of the world, who are not here. And so usually when we do some of these lives, it's for the benefit of the people who are not here to be able to get some of the insights that are being shared. And, you know, I try to like summarize what's going on. So with that, so by the way, just FYI, if you're listening, thank you, welcome. Feel free to say hello and where you're watching from, as always. And just FYI, this live session is for the universities. After this, I'll do my usual student regular one. So, you know, if you feel like that's what you came online for, then just join us later, because I don't want to waste your time. So this is really for the audience of university staff, career services staff, but also just if you're in AdCom or program office, any person who's just looking to help students with their job search, which of course has many different parts, right? So, all right, so I picked up, of course, you know, I couldn't go to I went to some sessions hobbling on one foot. I mean, it was kind of just excruciatingly painful, but also kind of embarrassing, because people must have was like, well, what kind of dance is she doing? Because I kept having to you know, like when you have a nerve thing, you have to keep on constantly moving it to get comfortable. And yeah, it just looks like I have ants in my pants or something, you know, it's just weird. So, but when I have to work, I have to work. So I managed to turn up and go to some of these sessions. And then I also, of course, talked to a lot of people and picked up some of the insights from my colleagues. And yeah, so there's a lot going on. So I'll just try to summarize. I think there are 3 key takeaways, at least for me. I mean, the way I kind of picked up what was going on today. And so the first one is that the skill set for MBAs, right? So there was a really great panel. So they were employers, and so there was AT&T, Delta, and Liberty Mutual, and it was great. They all 3 of them had different things to say, but on certain topics they were all exactly total agreement across the board. The MBA skill set is changing, and there's now a big focus on skill sets such as data analysis, data science, basically anything to do with data, right? And also coding, so that tech piece. So if you recall, we have been talking about this since probably 2016, if not earlier, about how the MBA skill set is now changing, or rather MBA jobs, right? The amount of opportunity there is changing. The landscape is changing. So it used to be like banking, consulting, marketing, you know, those were kind of like the main things. And now, well, I would say for the last 2 years, this has been like an absolute upward trajectory. And it's the fact that there's so many jobs in that tech vertical, right? So, and tech, by the way, I mean, tech is like, it's like not one thing, right? So tech can be product roles, so like Amazon and those kinds of roles. And then you have data. It's a different animal, right? And data itself splits up into data science and data analysis and other things, right? I mean, there's also financial engineering, coding, all kinds of things. And so that's the piece that has really taken off in terms of the amount of job opportunities. And as a result, of course, MBA programs are adjusting to make sure they incorporate classes, courses in these things, and even, say, for example, letting students get an extra certificate in these disciplines or specialize in them, right? So there's a lot of that going on. And it was kind of nice to hear the employers validating that literally by saying, I think one person just said coding. Like there was no other word than to just say that's the skill that's needed going forward. So, I mean, I would say it's a little bit broader than that, but it's all the skills that have to do, it's hard skills and technical skills that have to do with the tech piece that depends on this vast amount of data that we now have, right? That somebody somewhere has to analyze and get insights out of so that business decisions can be made on those insights. And so actually speaking about insights, I think they mentioned, and this is a really valid point, I've said it before as well, there will also be need for people who can, so you have the people who have to get the data, analyze it, and get the insights, but you also need people who can communicate that effectively to the client, right? I mean, data is like just, it's this huge thing. And then you do your analysis, get your insight, and then eventually you actually have to put this across to your audience, who tend to be senior managers and C-suite people who need to understand very quickly, like on one PowerPoint slide, you know, like, okay, what does all of this mean in terms of the decision that they have to take, right? And it has to be, it's by the time it gets to that, it's being condensed, and you have to be able to deliver that message to these people and then be confident enough to say, this is what we believe from the analysis, and here's all the data and work that we have done, right? So who's watching? Hi, Mickey. Hi, Cecilia. Thank you for joining in. All right, so that was one major thing. And then number two, of course, I have to mention this, international students. And so there is ongoing discussions on this topic, and actually I'm really happy to see that there's multiple sessions going on for international students. Like I think there were 2 today, and then there's like 2 tomorrow, and it's continuing. And it looks like they've done a really good job of addressing both the technical piece, the visa issues and work authorization and all of that. Like there's a immigration lawyer who's here answering questions, all the way to like the more strategic part of how do you just deal with employers and answer these questions and kind of position yourself. And of course, the really big one for career services is how do you help the students look at their job search in a more holistic way. All right, so I think here it's the biggest takeaway is that you do kind of have to tell students to look at this. There's no other option, right? Especially if you are in the US. But actually, I mean, even in Europe, it's a different challenge, but it's equally challenging, right? Because, I mean, in Europe, you don't get the H-1B lottery and all of that, but on the other hand, you still have to get work authorization. And unlike in the US, you don't get the 1-year OPT, right? So regardless, I mean, international students, wherever they're doing their degree, are going to face uphill battle, major challenges with staying in those countries. Some are easier than others, but that is there. And I think there's a recognition now across the board that, to help the students really reframe things so that they don't get narrowly focused on, I'm just looking for a job in the US, but rather an international job, right? So it could be the US, it could be other places, but just really asking students to think about things holistically and not just be very specific to that country, right? So this also is nothing new. I mean, we have been working on these strategies for like a long time, and I remember way back, I don't know, 2014, 2015, talking about, making sure that we tell students that this holistic approach, right? As opposed to US versus go back home. In some ways, though, home has become also a relatively good option, right? So if you look at, some of the challenges that have gotten, for lack of a better, kind of gotten worse, say with the US situation, there are a lot of international students, especially Chinese, not so much the Indian contingent, but definitely the Chinese who are in comparison now not just willing to go back home, but realizing that there are probably equally good opportunities, if not better opportunities, back in their part of the world, right? Whether it's Beijing or Hong Kong, Singapore. So I think there's also that, thank goodness, like students themselves, there's a shift in the market, and it's not like this crazy focus on, I came to the US, that's where I studied here, and I spent all this money, and I want to be here, which I think is a very valid way of looking at things. But now students themselves, I mean, they're sophisticated enough to know that it's not what it used to be, and there are a lot of challenges, so they themselves are already thinking of other options. And B, these other options are genuinely becoming more attractive. So you don't necessarily have to do like a hardcore sales pitch of, don't just think about the US, think about these other places. You can actually genuinely talk about the fact that there are just huge advantages now to working in a lot of these other global cities that are growing, that are open to global talent, and where international students actually have a big advantage. So there's that. I mean, just again, the message was, trying to reframe it and ensuring that international students that they're told that it's a very positive message of there are a lot of opportunities when you think globally. And then also, of course, even with the US, ultimately, plenty of international students get jobs year after year after year, right? You just have to manage expectations, right? Because no matter what, you have we can't get past the quota numbers, right? So it's at best 30% of H-1Bs. But who knows? I mean, there's legislation on that's being considered. There's several pieces of legislation actually. And so who knows, right? These things could change. But I think from company perspectives, it's tough. Right now, it's really tough because because there's uncertainty, it's adding to the whole thing, right? It's like if it's yes or no or whatever, they can handle that better. But no, it's like not knowing what the rules are going to be, it's making them nervous. So unfortunately, we're in a sort of time frame that is making companies very nervous. And so that affects the recruiting possibilities with students. Finally, let me remember. I'm sorry, I am in so much, this is so painful. Okay, I'm like blanking out because of the pain in my head. What was I gonna say? So we talked about the international students, we talked about, oh yes. So as many people have already observed, the MBA, the whole MBA thing is also changing, right? So a lot of business schools now offer what are called specialized master's programs. So they're usually 1 year long as opposed to the 2-year MBA. And they are, it could be, so finance is a big one, right? So like 3 years ago, the big thing was finance, right? Masters in finance. And now, I mean, you should see the amount of like specialized masters in data science and related. So this isn't going to stop. And it's actually, I haven't looked at the latest data, but I think the trend seems to be pointing towards that these programs are going to just grow a lot more. At least in terms of the schools and the way they think about it in the US, and let's say if they're thinking from a revenue perspective, definitely the specialized programs are just so much easier to recruit into for obvious reasons, because it's 1 year, the cost is less, and the world is changing, right? Just like the employers were talking about the skills that are needed, it could well be that, if those are the skills that they need, then do you really need an MBA, an expensive MBA, 2-year MBA to get those skills? Maybe the better thing to do is to get the 1-year specialized programs. And these are all still under the business school, right? But you'll also see that now other master's programs that have nothing to do with, that's not under the business school, but our master's programs in computer science, all of that. So those are the things that are growing exponentially. It seems like from what I heard from my colleagues and just people from, all the universities who are here and who are kind of talking about this, everyone is talking about the fact that there are a lot of specialized programs. And in fact, what's really interesting is at the conference, there are representatives from the Career Service Office, where very often one of the people on the team is for the specialized, they handle the career services or career coaching for people in the specialized programs. And that kind of goes to show, I don't think that was the case like 2-3 years ago, right? Because if they had one, it would be really small. Whereas now it's gaining so much importance, and coaching the students in these programs is a huge part of what the career services offices have to figure out. And so the teams include that person, right? So it's interesting to see how these things are changing, and it kind of gives you an idea of like what's important. So that was another big thing about how do you coach, how do you prepare students in these 1-year programs? Because remember that at least in the US, unlike in Europe, the MBA is 2 years, right? So the big thing about that is you get the internship in the middle of the 2 years. And typically the way it works is you recruit into your internship, and then the internship becomes a big piece of getting recruited into full-time, right? So in certain career paths like banking and consulting, it's almost like the recruiting methodology literally is like you hire from the class. The summer class is who they hire from. And then if they need a few more extra bodies, then they come back in the fall semester of the second year, right? So that's kind of like, that's been the case since I went to business school, like very long ago. I won't tell you when, but it was a long time ago. So, and that is what is going to be really impacted with these 1-year programs, because with the 1-year programs, you don't have the internship. You don't have that mechanism of interning for a future employer. And then the employer uses the talent pool in the summer to recruit out of full-time. So without that, it's like, okay, then you have to like, it's just a different strategy, right? Then you go back to like, it's more like just-in-time hiring. It's just different. It's a different kind of animal altogether. So I think a lot of the schools are trying to sort of figure out how to make sure that they provide the support needed to the students in these programs. One, because the system is different, and then two, because the skill set, right? We always keep going back to the skill set. So the skill sets in those programs are narrower, but far more targeted to the job market and demand at the moment. Okay, all right, I need a break. So feel free to, I mean, usually we get questions after these sessions, and then I always try to take them at some point. So think of me as, I mean, I'm here, I'm on the ground, I am trying to go to as many of these things as possible and talk to as many universities so that, you know, I can kind of summarize and get some of these insights out to a larger audience on behalf of a lot of people who are not attending. And yeah, so tomorrow looks like it's a packed day. I don't know whether I'll be at the conference or in the hospital. It could be either. But either way, you know me, I will like live stream from the hospital if I have to. All right, so hopefully that was useful. Thank you for listening, and I will catch you tomorrow.